Cool, thank you. So I'm going to speak to you today about Monster Galaxy and building social games for gamers. Just a little brief background about myself. I'm the CEO of Gaia Interactive, and we're the developers of Monster Galaxy on Facebook. Gaia has been around since 2003 and was one of the pioneers in virtual goods monetization. You're probably familiar with Gaia Online, the massive social gaming community that is the foundation of Gaia Interactive. And the transition in the past 2 years from being a developer who focuses entirely on building both your network and your games, the destination website Gaia Online, really developed in us as a company this competency to create deeply engaging experiences. One of the important things for us to figure out in the modern market is how we could take the team's talent and skills and apply that to the opportunities available on modern social gaming platforms. So I came into the company 2 years ago as the chief product officer and a year ago transitioned to be the CEO, precisely for that purpose, to help Gaia expand into being more of a multi-platform, multi-product social gaming company. I had developed Fluff Friends prior to coming to Gaia, and for those of you who remember the very, very early days of the Facebook platform, the ancient history of social gaming before it was called that, really, Fluff Friends was one of the first Facebook games with virtual currency monetization, the first to have a virtual currency you could buy with a PayPal button, and the first to integrate with many of the offer providers as they were just getting started, first to integrate with Peanut Labs and OfferPal. And so the combined understanding of developing games with a virtual goods model really allowed us to understand and rethink from first principles how you could approach developing games for gamers who are, for the most part, familiar with games that don't have the virtual goods model. Now, one more thing about myself is that I'm just always addicted to playing games. I'm in this industry because I absolutely love the products that come out of it, and the idea of building something fun that is, more than anything else, a true expression of my passion. So one thing I realized when putting together this talk on the topic of social games for gamers is that without really understanding who these quote-unquote gamers are that I'm speaking about, it undermines the entire premise of the talk, which is a bit difficult to categorize in the modern era, what comprises a gamer. So I think there are two ways that I'd like to approach thinking about this. One is, a recursive definition that I'm a little embarrassed to include, but basically gamers are people who play or have played video games. And where that becomes a meaningful distinction is when talking about the non-gamers who have been exposed to gaming on the Facebook platform or have played social gaming as the first time that they've ever truly played a game. That is a very interesting distinction in my mind because that has become, in many ways, what people view the social gamer to be. Social gaming is a market where you're primarily targeting women between the age of 40 and 50. They aren't familiar with games, and you can give them activities, but whether or not they resemble games or appeal to gamers is not the primary focus. And for me, that's madness. That's absurd. If you look at the entire gaming industry, most of the revenues that are fueling the industry are generated by people who love games, people who are gamers. And the idea that a platform where you can instantly jump into a game, you can play games for free, and you can play games and interact with your friends, not being a place that would appeal to gamers, was simply a flawed viewpoint that we aimed to disprove in many ways. The second way I like to think of gamers is, in many ways, just the litmus test, where you have this shared understanding of some of the common traits seen in games, some of the most popular notions ever conceived in games that have spread through popular media to become extremely well known to anyone who would even approach calling themselves a gamer. And so, if you, for example, know exactly what to do with that long skinny piece, you might be a gamer. Or if without a second hesitation, you know the difference between this mushroom and this mushroom, you're probably a gamer. And so, it's a very loose and lightweight definition, but still an important distinction, because I think that you can create something broadly appealing if you just take the simple steps towards thinking about what gamers would enjoy and what they'd be familiar with. So this idea of developing a social game for gamers has at times been considered an oxymoron. Like, there's the people who play social games on Facebook, and there's the gamers who play games in other places. And of course, there's some amount of overlap that gamers will naturally stumble upon a few social games that catch their fancy, but by and large, there's this much larger market of social game players. This is somewhat of a very outdated view, I think, with a lot of the recent games that have shown much more of an appeal to gamers, such as our game. But the view and the approach that I really took over the past year looks a lot more like this. So my belief is that if you play games in any form, whether it is on consoles, online, that there can exist a social game that will appeal to you, that whether you play casually or become a hardcore social game, there are so many more opportunities to develop social games for gamers. And really what you're left with is the people who are exclusively farm sim players and will not ever touch games, the exclusive console and PC gamers who simply don't use Facebook, but people who don't use social networks or don't use Facebook are becoming more few and far between. And then the opportunity right here in the middle, the future social game players. And I leave this as an open question because I believe that there's still only been a few cases of progress towards this goal, but I believe it's an incredibly worthwhile goal. Now, when thinking about this opportunity, this massive center to the Venn diagram, social games for gamers can be thought of as this new generation of social games that are integrating some of the best elements of social gaming, what has made them addictive, profitable, fun, and massively appealing, with the tried and true fundamentals of classic console games, the things that gamers would immediately recognize, understand, and enjoy. And ultimately, you can create experiences that are as appealing to traditional gamers as they are accessible to casual gamers, depending on how niche you go with your theme, how difficult you go with your game mechanics. You can try to create a game that's instantly familiar to people who have played video games before, but enjoyed in a new, compelling, and social way. And that's really just setting up what I am going to discuss at length today, the game that we developed, Monster Galaxy. For those of you who have not played it, I have an intro trailer. Enjoy. I just can't watch that enough. So the first thing I always have to remind folks after seeing the trailer is that that's a Facebook game. We really valued the production values in the development of Monster Galaxy. It's in the genre of a pet collection role-playing game, but in approaching this for Facebook, we had an extreme focus on artwork, characters, story, music, and the gameplay. You can see here the over 150 creatures we've created with over 50 NPCs to guide you along your quests, and over 100 hand-painted illustrated backgrounds with multiple layers that during battles have special effects very reminiscent of what you would expect to see on a console game, yet entirely done in Flash. And one more indication of the demand for this type of game on Facebook, and really confirmation that the demand for games on Facebook is not being met by the current supply, is the growth of Monster Galaxy. We launched on December 1st of 2010 and currently have over 15 million monthly active users, making Monster Galaxy the largest game on Facebook that's not made by Zynga. So this is a really interesting and promising result for what I believe to be the future of Facebook games, but I really want to take a step back to where the idea for Monster Galaxy came from and how we approach this project. I'd really love to say that I just, in a flash of insight one day, said, Pokemon's popular. Someone should build Pokemon for Facebook. But unfortunately, I'm not that smart. It's not that easy. And if I knew that was the case, then I would just do that again and again with things that are popular and figure out how to build them on Facebook. But that actually came later. That was not one of the immediate things we recognized, because you're heavily influenced by your background and what you've done before. And having developed Fluff Friends, I had infinite ideas on what Fluff Friends 2 would look like, and if I could go back and do it all over again, what I would want to develop. So Fluff Friends was a collage creator more than anything else, and the pets that you collected were stamps, basically ways that you can decorate your habitat, but had no character or depth to them, and had no statistics behind them. You couldn't invest time into them, and acquiring one was no different than just going to the store and purchasing it. There was not context behind why you should care about these creatures, and that sort of emotional depth and the sense of glory that you would get upon amassing a collection of pets was by and large lacking from Fluff Friends. And one of the things that I saw users try to apply to the game, but something I felt I could have done so much better with. So, a sequel to Fluff Friends was one of the driving thoughts. And then there was Ocean Party, which is Gaia Online's first game on Facebook before Monster Galaxy. The team transitioned the aquarium game from Gaia Online and basically ported it to Facebook. At that point, there were already at least a dozen other aquarium games on Facebook, and the team thought continually about, well, what can we do to make Ocean Party a unique experience different from any other aquarium game, and kept having ideas around leaving your tank and taking your fish on adventures and going out and exploring the world. And the more that we started talking about some of these concepts, the more that we realized we were talking about an entirely different game that was not really shoehorned into Ocean Party. So around the same time, one of the things that we saw was you've seen this before, the infographic joke of if Mario Brothers was a social game. And while it's fairly amusing, here you see that as soon as you get a mushroom, you get the opportunity to post to the stream and share with your friends. All of us who were developing the game absolutely loved console games, and as we were thinking about how to approach a game for gamers, a game that really appeals to the in many ways unsaturated audience that is demanding games on Facebook, the 13 to 35-year-olds who don't have as many game developers at that time actively working to deliver content catered for them, we started reimagining all of the most popular games of all time, literally looking down a list of Wikipedia games, Wikipedia's list of most popular games, and having a meaningful discussion on what would this game be like on Facebook? What would it mean to play The Legend of Zelda on Facebook? At what points would you want to interact with friends? What would the request be? What would the stream post be? What would the reasons to come back later be? How would you monetize with virtual goods? We had this conversation around pretty much every one of these games, and in many cases there were examples of online games that were somewhat meaningful already, but in most cases there were no examples of Facebook games that really emulated the characteristics of some of these foundational games that rank very highly in the mind of gamers, especially ones who in their formative years were playing these games and gained that impression of what video games can be. And so, through this, we kept coming back to this concept of a pet collection battle game, and ultimately began development around July, mid-June of last year, with about 4 developers and 4 artists, all in a room working together, and a planned development schedule of about 4 months. Now, in general, I love the philosophy that you release a game when it's done, but at the same time, with so much pressure on development speed, I felt as though we had to set some reasonable boundaries on the amount of time that we should spend, as well as the notion that everything that we believe about the game and what we need to do and why it will be successful might be wrong, and the way that we're going to determine that is by putting it out in the wild, making our best guesses of what the most important things we need to do are, and then listening to users and listening to the data. So we developed the battle first. That's the core of the game, and if that's not a compelling, fun, meaningful experience, everything around that, the quest, the world, the framework, simply would fall flat. We iterated quite a bit, as you can see from some of the initial prototypes, realizing screen elements that don't need to be there during certain sequences, and really we're constantly building. There was no design period up front and development period after that. From day one, the engineers were building one portion, the artists were drawing another portion, the designers were speccing out another portion, all kind of coming together in controlled chaos. But what made this so useful for something where we're really trying to innovate and do something that there's not as many examples to work from is that the rapid prototypes give you a basis to work from and allow user testing, which I'll get much more into detail later. Some of the early design decisions we made that ended up influencing greatly a lot of what we ultimately built was, first off, no avatars. Many RPGs and pet collection battle games in particular have a character that you can walk around with, you can dress up, which for us, having developed Gaia Online, seemed like a slam dunk that could potentially make perfect sense. But the two things that led us to feeling, in addition to scope creep and trying to constrain what we needed to do, the two things that really made us feel as though it could be a stronger game without avatars is this sense that you should focus on monsters. When you come to the game, you should see monsters, monsters that you own, monsters that you're battling, monsters that you want to capture, and there is simply instant action. You can jump in and click on what you want to do and do it without having to walk around. And we felt as though for the attempt to make the game more accessible, anything that takes you away from the most fun aspects of the game, such as travel time, walking around, would potentially limit that. Our target audience, at least in our mind, was, of course, gamers, but between the ages of 13 and 35, in a lot of ways, we made the mistake of developing a game for ourselves that comprises most of the development team. But with the demographic that we were targeting, we really wanted to see if we could make it as appealing to the Gaia Online community as possible. Gaia Online is roughly 50-50 male and female, and in many ways we thought that while Gaia Online filled a need in the market in 2003, Monster Galaxy would fill that need in the market in 2010. So with a 50-50 male-female split, how can you create a design aesthetic that will be appealing to that demographic? ultimately we figured artwork that's appealing to girls with gameplay appealing to boys. It's inspired by Kingdom Hearts in many ways, which achieves this split quite well, and is a game that we admire enormously. But that's one of the reasons why the monsters that we developed would range from fierce to cute to absurd. There's something for everyone when you first come into the game that you can immediately latch onto and identify. Basically, a sense that you will select the monster right up front that will guide your experience for the rest of the game and your impression of who this game is for, such that it ends up being a game that can appeal to more people. Another early design decision was the unifying theme of the Horoscope and the Zodiac. This sense of why are these monsters here? We wanted to have an answer to that question. We didn't want people to come into this game and feel as though it was not backed by any theme, any world that you could grow attached to. And so, well, of course, they are celestial creatures that fall from shooting stars and are associated with their zodiac signs and appeal to tamers who are born in the month of that zodiac sign. This unifying theme ended up not just leading to the name being Monster Galaxy, but also many of the designs, the idea of having the battle where different zodiac signs will be either better or worse against each other, influences from across the spectrum, all unified by this theme. So I mentioned before that we wanted to create a variety of monsters that would appeal to everyone. And one of the things that Gaia has in spades is extremely talented artists. It's one of the main reasons I was attracted to come to the company, because I felt as though the level of quality in your visual presentation was going to be one of the most important distinguishing factors in the next generation of social games. And so we focused enormously on creating so many different monsters and a vehicle for the artists to be able to express their passions through the game. If you happened to be obsessed with Spanish soccer players, you could create monsters around that concept. If you were obsessed with the colors of the rainbow, you could create monsters around that concept. And within the company, we got contributions for our monsters from roughly 15 different artists, all in-house, all working together at many times just after hours to be able to create more content. Now, in terms of the art style, the thing that has worked extremely well for Gaia Online, I mentioned before being influenced by your past experiences, is to put a cat on it. We have an anthropomorphized picture of our creative director here, giving the instructions when a designer asks, what should this dialogue look like? Or who should be running the sky shop where you purchase items? And, over 50% of the times the answer would come back with put a cat on it. When you arrive first at the game, all monster tamers are given a personal assistant that help guide them through their journeys, and this personal assistant is a cat. So there's some of these early design decisions that once you make them, imply what you're going to continue doing, and in many ways make your future decisions easier. But I think putting a stake in the ground like that helped us improve our development speed, for better or for worse. I'll get to that cats later. So we wanted Monster Galaxy to be a casual RPG with depth. Casual is not necessarily in conflict with depth, as you well know, but it is a challenge. For one thing, we wanted there to be no wrong button to click. If you come into the game and you just start clicking around, you're not reading anything, and you're just like click, 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 yeah, you'll actually make some progress. You can win. It's very easy to play in that sense. Every button has some positive action. It's going to attack. But there are layers of strategy, as I show here, that we instantly make it apparent without having to dig deeper what this particular zodiac attack will do versus another zodiac sign, as well as some of the special properties of this attack if you choose to use this. And so you're forced to make real choices, as you are in any game. But at the same time, if you don't want to make those choices or can't be bothered to make those choices, it passes the I can't read test. We had a version of the game where we asked a user, as one of our employees, to simply click around, see how far you get, click on whatever is large and shiny, and go from there. And once it passed that test, we knew we were doing pretty well. So another important aspect of making it casual is that you can always walk away and come back. Your state is saved after every click. So you're in the middle of the battle, you're about to die, and the phone rings, or the boss walks by, or you're going to go on a 2-week vacation right now. You can come right back, you'll be exactly where you were when you left. And the state being saved after every click significantly decreases the pressure associated with playing the game. But at the same time, also allows for an interesting strategy where you can come into the game, finally encounter the monster that is an epic, legendary, rare monster, not have all the available resources to be able to capture it at this time, and ask your friends to come and help you out. If the friends reply to those requests and give you the resources, you'll be right there in the battle once again and be able to make progress. And it was just an interesting design decision that in trying to make the game more casual, we stumbled upon all these different strategies that users employed this mechanism for. And finally, this idea of increasing depth by making the game, for the most part, linear, but with optional branches. If you just go down the main path of the game, always doing the I can't read test, clicking on the next thing that you're supposed to click on, you'll be exposed to half of the game's content, roughly. But there are multiple goals users can choose to pursue at any given time. You can either want to flesh out your entire collection, make progress in the underlying story, or level up. And there's reasons why you would want to do each of these, additional incentives or bonuses. You can explore particular areas only if your collection is large enough. You can go into a quest in the most difficult area of the game only if you have strong enough monsters on your team. Now, in discussing building a casual RPG with depth for Facebook specifically, there's several aspects of how are we going to take the tried and true best-in-class social gaming mechanics and apply them to this game, which in many ways is how are you going to play with friends, with in quotes for some definitions of with. Our thought was really how we can introduce asynchronous moments of joy. Moments where friends come in to the game in a meaningful way that makes you happy that your friends are there. And one of the first things that we realized is that being able to battle with your friends and have a friend who can help you out in a moment of need is probably the most pure expression of this asynchronous moment of joy. We created this mechanic called the whistle tree. Whistle tree is harvested from your friend's ranch, and when you use a whistle in battle, it calls one of your friend's monsters into battle. That was almost the only social mechanic that we launched with, and remains to this day by far the most important. The appointment mechanic is a very important one, as you well know, among social games, because of the trade-off between time and money. Basically, you can either come back now, or you can expend some resource, whether that is social currency, virtual currency. And our game, in thinking through how we can have this appointment mechanic, really got applied in one primary way, which is simply that your monsters take time to heal. When your monsters are higher level, they will take more time to heal. And when you want to go out and battle more, you will hopefully come back after your monsters are fully rested. And the final is the idea of the social mechanics, the prompts to interact with your friends through the social channels that Facebook provides, with the general rule that we tried to follow being that there's a game mechanic, and you'd be a jerk not to click send on this request. And what I mean by that is if a friend wants or needs your help and we use a algorithm to determine which friend will be the one that either for your goals, their goals, or our goals as developers is the right one to prompt you to send a message to. You should do this for their sake. You should do this for your sake. You'd be a jerk not to click send, really now. And likewise on the receiving end, you'd be a fool not to click accept. These social mechanics are such a compelling way to make progress in the game that if you care about the game at all, you'd be a fool not to click accept. So that sense of thinking about a feature and applying the rule where we know at the point at which the emotional reaction is going to be you'd be a jerk not to click send or a fool not to click accept, then we've done our job designing the social mechanic. So I spoke a bit about the depth in the game, and we really wanted to create a game that people could love. Love is a funny thing. It's hard to define, but I think people love things that have much more things to grow attached to, depth and specific characters and character traits. So in crafting our story, we followed the tropes of many of the classic stories with heroes and villains, characters with motives that you can't trust, and characters with a childhood rivalry. We have Skylar here in the middle among the most popular characters, who's continually referred to as the worst guy. He thwarts you at every turn. So that idea that we wanted to really ensure that users can write fan fiction about this. They can think about what these characters, how they got there, that there's something more to it than even just what we're showing them, was something that was very important to us. And I mentioned it earlier, I didn't want the collection aspect to simply be something where it felt like collecting stamps, going to the store and buying them, but rather it's a glorious moment. And one phrase that we used was that it's YouTube worthy when you achieve this capturing of a legendary monster. So I think we've met this goal. I was doing the search just a moment ago, and there's at this point over 2,000 videos on YouTube of people capturing monsters in Monster Galaxy. And finally, just a consistent world where everything belongs. There's not just some button that takes you to the shop because, well, we need a button that takes you to the shop, but there's a way to call the Sky Cats to fly their Sky Shop down to you wherever you happen to be, and of course cats help monster tamers, so they will be the purveyor of the wares that you'll need on your quest. This sense that everything belongs in this consistent world was something that we actually talked about a fair amount. There shouldn't simply be random things hacked into the game without a strong point of view. So user testing was extremely eye-opening, and in many ways some of the philosophies and decisions that we made started to unravel when doing user testing, because of course we're aiming to build a successful game, a successful business, and we need to listen to the market, the demands of our users, and the data. We did 4 types of user testing. One of the most important is your own team. Everyone needs to be playing the game. Dog food is very nutritious because some of the best ideas come from people on the team. I would be hard-pressed to say who designed Monster Galaxy because it was without a doubt just the combination of everyone working together and playing the game, contributing ideas. Craigslist and Facebook ads will allow you to find random people to come and be a game tester. And this is something where we didn't do anything too fancy. We'd invite them into our main conference room, set them up with the game, and have every team member that was available just sitting around and watching them play. Trying, not to put too much pressure on them, but it actually worked out surprisingly well, the insights that we gained. Usertesting.com is extremely useful once you have a product launched, because you can look at not just your game and get an opinion where people are talking while they're playing, so they're saying all their thoughts, which customarily you don't get as much with non-professional user testers. But you can also just look at your competitors' games and watch how people play your competitors' games. When Cityville launched, I watched several people play Cityville for the first time through usertesting.com because it's absolutely an amazing game, and understanding it from the perspective of people who aren't thinking and unraveling all the social and game mechanics in their mind, but are just going and checking it out and having a good time, really helps you understand what people end up clicking and doing. And one interesting thing is professional designers gain expert opinions. We invited several people, most notably the designer in residence from Google Ventures, to come and play our game and check out just what their opinion of it is, because it's very different having a random person on the street as the first impressions of someone who thinks endlessly about design of user-facing products. So if you know people who can help you out like this and you can't woo them to come and work for you, you can still get a ton of the benefit just from asking them to play your game. So first rule of user testing, you don't talk during user testing. You let them make mistakes. If they're not clicking on what you want them to click on, it's your fault, it's not their fault. The whole team should attend because everyone can pick up something different, whether it's that niggling, annoying thing that they understand because they worked on it, and they'll see it, but you might not see it, or just a different perspective about what the user is doing. In person or virtually, we used Silverback to be able to record each of our user testing sessions and ensure that everyone watches them. So the goal in this is to make sure no one gets stuck. Everyone makes progress, users know what they're supposed to do, and they have fun. When players want to continue playing the game after you've already handed them the $25 Visa card and said they can go on their way, and they keep playing it, or they continue saying, oh, here's another friend who would like it, and here's another friend who would like it. It's an extremely rewarding moment. So some of the insights we gained from user testing, this was a unique difference. Almost everyone watches the cutscenes. There's a continual debate around cutscenes. I mentioned so much about needing to layer in depth and story and characters, and the way that we approached this was cutscenes and non-interactive portions of the game, which kind of rub someone the wrong way who's trying to develop an interactive game. But the people in the user testing group that we that brought in internally appreciated it enormously. We can see them reading each and every word and trying to glean some usefulness from this. Potentially, that's because we had a room of 10 people sitting around them, and they felt like they'd be insulting us if they weren't reading each of these words that we had put time into. UserTesting.com folks, by and large, appreciated the cutscenes, but more often would be looking for the skip button. One thing that was amazing was that no one clicked Call Friend. We had, within the battle interface, one of the buttons that is the button that uses your bonus attack whistle from a friend's whistle tree to call a friend in. When the button was labeled Call Friend, no one clicked it. People would avoid this like the plague. And I think by requesting for people to come in who are familiar with Facebook games, there was a stigma against using the word friend or interacting with friends in a Facebook game, oddly enough. But everyone clicked bonus attack, and when they clicked it and they saw a friend jump in and help them, they loved it, and then they clicked it again. So that was one of those things that I don't think we would have thought of without having users come in and observe what they're doing. And finally, when there's only one right thing users should be doing, just put the damn arrow on it. That's a very simple and straightforward lesson that can be applied, but if you're sitting there waiting for the user to discover that they're on the first node of the map, the next thing to do is click on the second node of the map, and that's the only correct thing to be doing right now, CP the Tiger has a comment for how you should fix that. So then we launched the game, and post-launch, we learned a couple immediate lessons that were surprising us. One thing, it turns out we built a game for boys, not girls. Despite all of our best intentions around the design of the game, a monster collection battle game is more appealing to boys, and I mean this in every respect in terms of the cost per acquisition, the retention, the monetization potential. Males comprise 2/3 of our audience. Not 80% or 90%, but 2/3, and I think that's potentially testament to the fact that we aimed to be appealing to both genders, but it's hard to say ultimately whether or not that's the best decision. It's the decision that we made. And the key revenue drivers that we figured would be essential to gameplay and would be some of the top monetizing items were not. We launched with two major things: star seeds that let you capture more monsters, and blue coffee, which lets you trade money for time by instantly revitalizing your monsters and allowing you to go out and battle again. And as it turns out, people love monsters. They want to capture the monsters. That accounts for more than double the sales, despite our best efforts to balance your need for them to be roughly similar. And that enormously changed our focus on the different gameplay mechanics that would have extended out the content versus adding more monsters for you to capture. In terms of growth and acquiring traffic, I mentioned earlier how we've grown to 15 million monthly active users, so I wanted to go briefly over the different ways that we've acquired traffic to achieve this. But first and notably, Gaia Online traffic is a unique advantage that, having developed and owned a social gaming destination with 4 million visitors per month, we're able to seed the community with some of the most qualified, high-quality traffic that one could hope for. Acquisition marketing has played an enormous role in the growth of Monster Galaxy, especially after we started gaining some initial traction and realizing that it was a viable strategy. But the way that we approach acquisition marketing is probably not incredibly different from the way a lot of people approach it. We split the different countries into 5 tiers based on the ARPU percentiles, tier 1 being the top 20 percentile, and so forth. We separate the spend out by gender among those tiers, and then by age buckets among those as well, and have a particular cost per install associated with that based on the potential revenue that we can gain from that different group of users. And we really don't purport to be know-it-alls. We're more like learn-it-alls. We'll work with pretty much any external advertiser who says that they can bring traffic to your game, do an exploratory spend, see how well it works, and how much we're willing to spend with that potential advertiser, in addition to continually maintaining and refreshing our own internal campaigns. So with the revenue-focused spend, we've aimed to acquire users. We can earn back the cost per acquisition in 3 months. The users that we acquired in the first month after launch, we realized we weren't actually spending enough to acquire these users, as the earn back was closer to 2 weeks. But as anyone who has scaled a Facebook game knows, your first users are your best users. Over time, you saturate the available audience who, as soon as they see your ad, immediately clicks on and says, "This is what I've been waiting for my whole life." And it becomes more of a challenge. It's a higher cost per acquisition, a lower retention and revenue potential, and at this point, we're trying to balance at a roughly 3-month earn back. But we also do a reach-focused spend. I think hyper-optimizing in one local maxima around revenue-focused spend will miss some of the interesting opportunities that you can get if you devote a small fraction of your overall ad spend to simply finding the most possible users for the least possible money. Cross-promotion is important. I won't go into too many details, but it's important both as an acquisition tool and a retention tool. There's only so many ways people are going to remember to come back to your game or get to it, and cross-promotion provides one additional one. But above all else, I've gone into a lot of detail, people need to love your game. If people love your game, your organic and viral growth will be so much more than if people don't love your game. People decidedly did not love Ocean Party, but people love Monster Galaxy. And one of the things that you can do when you need to improve your organic and viral conversion ratio is refine the top of the funnel. So a lot of data-driven insights that we've gained in working on Monster Galaxy are that the first 5 milliseconds matters, not the first 5 minutes, not the first 5 seconds. This screen, when users first arrive at your game, this is what they see: a general permissions dialog from Facebook saying, would you like to allow this game to access your personal data? And one of the things we were doing as we were refining our ad strategy was testing a lot of different creatives. As I mentioned, we thought the game would be for both genders. It turns out it's decidedly more for males, especially in our acquisition marketing strategy. And so we took some of the top most effective graphics from the ads and made that our permissions dialog graphic. This one change, 5% increase in conversion. This started the great migration from put a cat on it to put a dragon on it. And it's really interesting to change your design philosophy halfway through. A lot of the community efforts that we had, allowing users to create backgrounds and icons and change their profile picture to Monster Galaxy, and things that looked like this, I love my mogas, started to look a lot more like this. And it's fairly amusing, but extremely important. The only thing that we could measure reliably is the absolute top of the funnel change, because the numbers are big enough there that you can notice a statistically significant difference without extending your test on indefinitely. But the Great Dragon Migration pretty much permeated all of the design elements of the game moving forward, and led to a period of growth after a long period of stagnation. I can't say it's specifically due to this change because so many other things were changing at the same time, but we internally believed, and I expressed this to my board, yeah, we created about a 5 million MAU game. That's just how many people there are on Facebook that are interested in this type of game. Before so many changes, especially converting around the top of the funnel, led to a lot of growth. So some of the data-driven insights that are important is to not trust yourself. We had this hypothesis, I've mentioned the cutscenes before, but I know for a fact we lose users during the 20-second animated intro sequence that you first come to our game, you see two monsters battling and some rock music playing, and it's a very glorious animation. It's very exciting. It gets me pumped. But as the first thing someone sees who may or may not be deciding right then and there whether to ever give you the time of day again, I had serious concerns around whether or not we should include this intro movie. So we did an A/B test. Showed it to half the users, removed it for the other half of the users, and showing the intro movie was significantly better in pretty much all respects. Like, there was a point that the number of users who had this experience crossed such that, especially by day one, the users who saw the intro sequence, more people would be there, not just on a percentage basis, on an absolute basis. So, the idea that we're creating a game with more depth that is resembling games that have this sort of introduction actually proved to be true in this case. We haven't tested different intro sequences. I think that would be a logical next step. And we had another hypothesis that our items are just too expensive. When you don't know what the price should be, just throw it out there and test. And so our coffee and our star seeds were something that we received significant complaints around the price of them. Anyone who's operated a game with virtual goods knows that one of the most common things you'll ever hear is that your items are too expensive. You'll never hear that your items are too cheap. So we cut the price in half, and sure enough, our items are not too expensive. We have more purchasers at the lower price, but less revenue overall. I just wanted to mention briefly that our game has pretty deep engagement. Our session times are around 21 minutes, and this sort of what we call modern sitcom allows us to drive value for brands. We recently ran a campaign with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where users would be able to watch the movie trailer and receive an item in-game. The completion rate on the video trailer was 98%, and on the 5-day flight, we drove about 900,000 trailer views. And I think this has been an important lesson that for us in the value of driving deep engagement, and that it opens up so many opportunities, especially for a company like Gaia with a long history in pioneering different ways to monetize through both sponsorship, advertising, and virtual goods. So evolving your process is important. And as we've been listening to data, we've been continually evolving how we operate, what we work, and the mantra that comes down from our benevolent creative director, CP the Tiger. So we use Contagion. Everyone on the team uses Contagion and has their own unique dashboard looking at what matters the most to them. Checking it almost every day. So it's important to check Contagion, ensure that the graph goes up. Friday Bump is something we didn't expect, but has guided a lot of our development. There's a sense that people play games, social games, when they're at work or at school. Our game is the Saturday morning cartoon of social games. We get a huge Friday Bump, and we don't entirely control it, but now that we know about it, we try and use it to its fullest and really play to our strengths. Well, how can we make the Friday bump even more? Let me scope that for you is a phrase that's become very important for us to ensure that the amount of effort put into any feature we develop is not greater than the potential returns that we could get from it. We try and scope everything down to the minimal amount necessary to launch the A/B test to determine if it's worthwhile. And we've set a lot of goals for ourselves within the team, things that once we achieve these, we can celebrate. When we first started generating over $9,000 in revenue per day, that was an exciting moment. And I made a promise to the team that when we get over 5,000 daily active users, which I thought was just inconceivable, never possible, we're going to buy dogs for everyone on the team. We're just going to be swimming in dogs. That was a bad idea. Should not have made that promise. So I want to just briefly mention that Games for Gamers is something that a lot of people started thinking around the same time. Some that I believe follow a very similar process of taking a concept that's well known and beloved and then creating that for Facebook with a custom social version. Uber Strike is an incredible Unity-based first-person shooter, in many ways reminiscent of Counter-Strike, that has grown fantastically, almost entirely organically. And not enough praise could be given to Backyard Monsters, really modernizing the tower defense from casual gaming to become a social game. This is definitely one of my favorite social games. So I spent a lot of time talking about Monster Galaxy, but I do want to leave with one quick lesson around the formula for a successful social game, which is simply that you need to start with a great game, a concept that you give attention to detail to, you care about, that can be fun, has a large potential audience, not going to be extremely niche. Something original will improve virality. People are more willing to share something they've never seen before. I call it the Susan Boyle style of virality. Aggressive marketing and promotion, absolutely critical in the current social gaming environment, and constant data-informed iteration, then you have a chance at success. It's not a proven formula, it's getting increasingly difficult, but I really do believe that if you make games people love, and you do it on, make games for gamers, there's huge opportunity available on Facebook. So I think I'm actually out of time entirely. But if you have any questions at all, I'm happy to take them.